Don't touch her. The words cut through the glittering charity gala like a blade, freezing every laugh, every champagne glass, every diamond smile inside the ballroom of the Marcelli Hotel in Manhattan. 3 seconds earlier, Clara Bennett had been on her knees beside a shattered tray, her black waitress uniform soaked with champagne, her cheeks burning while a circle of models in silver gowns laughed above her as if she were part of the entertainment. Clara was 28, a curvy, full-figured waitress from Queens, working her second double shift of the week because her mother's medical bills did not care how tired her feet were. She had learned to keep her head down, to smile when rich people snapped their fingers, to pretend she did not hear the whispers about her body, her size, the way her uniform pulled at her hips after 12 hours of work. But tonight, pretending became impossible when Vanessa Cole, the most photographed model in the room, and the woman everyone assumed would soon marry the most dangerous man in New York, tipped her glass on purpose and said loudly, "Careful, sweetheart. This room is for women who know how to carry themselves." Laughter rolled across the marble floor. Clara's fingers tightened around a broken stem of glass, not from anger, but from the effort of not crying. She had been mocked before. In school hallways, in fitting rooms, by men who called her pretty only as a joke, by customers who acted as if kindness from a big woman was something they were entitled to but never had to return. Still, she picked up the glass first because a young busboy behind her was barefoot after slipping out of a torn shoe, and she saw the sharp pieces near his ankle. That was why Luca Marcelli noticed her. Not because she was the loudest, not because she tried to impress him, because while the room humiliated her, she protected someone smaller. Luca Marcelli, Mafia Boss of the Marcelli family, stood at the top of the grand staircase in a black tailored suit, surrounded by guards who never smiled. He was 36, wealthy enough to buy the building, feared enough to empty it with one order, and cold enough that even his allies lowered their voices when he entered. People said Luca had no heart left after his younger brother was betrayed and killed 5 years ago. They said he trusted contracts more than people and silence more than love. Tonight he had come to this gala to secure a political alliance, pose beside Vanessa for the cameras, and remind half the city that his empire still breathed. He had ignored every model who touched his arm, every heiress who offered him a practiced smile, every woman dressed like a fantasy. Then he saw Clara bleeding from a tiny cut on her palm and hiding it behind her back so nobody would make a scene. Vanessa stepped closer, her smile sweet enough for cameras and cruel enough for corners. "Someone get her out before she breaks anything else," she said. "Maybe the kitchen has a wider doorway." The room laughed again, but this time the sound died halfway because Luca was already coming down the stairs. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. His polished shoes crossed the marble with slow, controlled danger, and every man in the room seemed to remember an urgent reason to look away. Clara froze when his shadow fell over her. She knew exactly who he was. Everyone in New York knew the Marcelli name. She expected him to step around her like the others. Instead, he crouched, picked up a clean napkin, and wrapped it around her bleeding hand with a gentleness so unexpected that Clara forgot how to breathe. "Your name," he said, low enough that only she heard the softness under the command. "Clara Bennett," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Marcelli, I'll pay for the glass." His eyes lifted to hers, dark, unreadable, and strangely furious on her behalf. "You will not pay for being pushed." Vanessa's smile flickered. "Luca, darling, it was an accident." Luca stood, towering between Clara and the crowd, his body becoming a wall no one dared cross. "Then apologize." One word. Calm. Deadly. Vanessa laughed once, thinking he was joking, then saw his guards move half a step closer. Her face went pale under the ballroom lights. Clara's throat tightened. Not because she wanted revenge, but because for the first time in years someone had said her humiliation was not normal, not funny, not deserved. But before Vanessa could speak, the busboy Clara had protected tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Miss Clara, the man near the back door put something in Mr. Marcelli's drink." Luca heard it. So did Clara. Across the room, a waiter Clara did not recognize slipped through the service exit with a silver tray and shaking hands. Luca's expression turned from protective to lethal. His guards moved, but Clara moved first, grabbing the untouched glass from Luca's table before anyone could reach it. A sharp chemical smell rose beneath the champagne. The entire gala went silent. Luca looked from the glass to Clara, then to the service doors closing at the far end of the hall. In that moment, the woman everyone had mocked became the only reason the Mafia Boss was still standing. Clara stepped back, suddenly terrified of what she had uncovered, and whispered, "I think someone tried to poison you." Luca's gaze locked on her bleeding hand, then on the exit where the stranger had disappeared. "Take her to my private office," he ordered his guards. Clara shook her head, fear flashing through her tired eyes. "No, I have to go home." For the first time all night, Luca Marcelli looked uncertain, almost human. Not alone. But Clara was already slipping through the side corridor, ashamed, frightened, and desperate to disappear before this dangerous world swallowed her whole. Luca watched her leave through the rain-streaked glass doors, ignored Vanessa calling his name, ignored the alliance waiting to be signed upstairs, and followed the Curvy Waitress into the New York night. The black SUV did not scare Clara nearly as much as the man stepping out of it without an umbrella. Rain poured over the street outside the Marcelli Hotel, turning Manhattan headlights into long ribbons of gold. But Luca Marcelli walked through it like the weather had been ordered to obey him. Clara had made it half a block in aching shoes before she heard his voice behind her. "Clara Bennett." She stopped near the curb, clutching her coat closed over her soaked waitress uniform, her wounded hand tucked against her chest. "Please don't follow me, Mr. Marcelli," she said, trying to sound brave even while her voice shook. "I didn't do anything heroic. I smelled something strange. That's all." Luca looked at her hand, then at the dark street behind her, where two men in plain coats had slowed their walk the moment she turned. His face did not change, but the air around him did. "Those men have been following you since the service exit." Clara's breath caught. "What?" Luca lifted two fingers. From the curb, his guards moved silently, cutting across the sidewalk with the calm precision of men who did not need to run. The strangers saw them, turned, and disappeared into an alley before anyone touched them. Clara stepped backward, rain dripping from her curls, humiliation from the ballroom mixing with fear in her eyes. "This is why I didn't want your help. Trouble like yours doesn't leave politely." "Trouble like mine just tried to poison me," Luca said, "and now it knows your name." A yellow cab splashed past them, spraying water over the gutter. Clara flinched, but Luca shifted closer, blocking most of it with his body before she realized what he was doing. It was such a small thing, so quiet and unnecessary, that it unsettled her more than his power. Powerful men had looked through her, laughed at her, or wanted something from her. They did not ruin expensive suits to keep dirty street water off her legs. "I can get home by myself," she whispered. "Queens is not far." "It is far enough for a frightened woman being hunted," he replied. Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm not one of your people." Luca's dark eyes stayed on hers. "You saved my life in a room full of people who were paid to protect it. For tonight, that makes you more important than most of them." She wanted to argue, but a siren wailed somewhere down the avenue and her phone buzzed in her pocket. When she looked at the screen, her face went pale. Luca saw the message before she could hide it. One line: "Pay by midnight, or your mother loses the room." Clara locked the screen fast, ashamed. "It's nothing." Luca's voice lowered. "Hospital debt? Don't." She shook her head. "I don't need pity from a man who probably spends more on cufflinks than I make in 3 months. For a moment, something almost like pain crossed his face, gone so quickly that anyone else would have missed it. "My brother died in a private hospital suite with 6 doctors outside the door," he said. "Money did not save him." Clara looked up, caught off guard by the quiet wound beneath the dangerous name. The rain softened around them. For the first time, she did not see only the Mafia Boss everyone feared. She saw a man who had built walls so high even grief had to knock before entering. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it so simply that Luca turned away as if kindness burned. His driver opened the SUV door. Clara hesitated. Inside was black leather, tinted glass, a world that did not belong to women who counted tips at 2 in the morning. "I'm not going anywhere private with you," she said. "Then I'll ride in front and my driver will take you home. Your choice." That stopped her. Not because it was generous, but because he offered a choice. Clara slid into the back seat, keeping as much distance from him as possible, when he surprised her by taking the front passenger seat exactly as promised. During the ride over the Queensborough Bridge, Luca made 3 calls. On the first, he shut down the gala. On the second, he ordered every security camera from the ballroom copied before anyone could erase footage. On the third, his voice became ice. "Find the waiter. Alive. I want to know who paid him." Clara watched the city lights ripple across the window and tried not to feel safer just because he was near. When the SUV stopped outside her small brick apartment building in Queens, the lobby light was flickering, and the front door was cracked open. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "That door was locked when I left. Luca was out of the SUV before the driver could speak. Stay behind me." "My mother is upstairs," Clara said, panic sharpening every word. This time she did not wait, she ran. Luca followed her up 3 flights, his men close behind, but Clara reached the apartment first and froze in the doorway. The living room had been searched, drawers open, cushions sliced, family photos scattered across the floor. Her mother's medical equipment beeped softly from the bedroom, but beside the overturned coffee table sat a white envelope with Luca Marcelli's name written across it in red ink. Luca picked it up slowly, opened it, and found a single photo inside. It was Clara at the gala, kneeling in broken glass, taken only minutes before the poison was found. On the back, one sentence had been written by hand. She was not supposed to notice. "Someone came into my home while my mother was asleep," Clara whispered, and for the first time since Luca had met her, fear broke through her voice so completely that even his men went still. The apartment was small, warm from an old radiator, and filled with the kind of love money could not fake. Folded blankets on the couch, prescription bottles lined in careful order, framed photos of Clara at 12 years old holding a spelling bee ribbon, Clara at 18 in a graduation gown, Clara at 28 smiling beside her mother, even though both of them looked exhausted. Luca stood in the middle of the damage, holding the white envelope with his name on it, his rain-dark suit dripping onto the worn wooden floor. His jaw tightened when he looked at the photo of Clara kneeling in broken glass. "This was taken from inside the ballroom," he said. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of her soaked uniform, her torn tights, the blood drying beneath the napkin on her palm. "Then someone from the hotel did this. Or someone invited there," Luca said. From the bedroom, a weak voice called, "Clara?" Clara ran before anyone could stop her. Her mother, Mrs. Bennett, lay propped against pillows, pale but awake, one hand clutching the blanket. "Baby, why are there men in the apartment?" Clara forced a smile so fast it hurt. "Everything's okay, Mom." There was a break-in downstairs. "Mr. Marcelli is helping." Mrs. Bennett's eyes moved past Clara to Luca, and instead of fear, something like recognition flickered across her face. "Marcelli," she murmured. Luca noticed it. Clara did too. "Mom?" But before Mrs. Bennett could answer, Luca's phone rang. He stepped into the hallway, listened for 5 seconds, and the softness in his face vanished. "Say that again," he ordered. Clara came to the doorway, heart pounding. Luca ended the call and turned to her. "The waiter who carried my drink was found 3 blocks from the hotel, alive, scared. He says a woman paid him $10,000 to switch trays." Clara swallowed. "Vanessa." Luca did not answer quickly enough. He said the woman wore silver. The same colour as Vanessa's gown. The same woman who had laughed while Clara bled. The same woman New York gossip pages had already chosen as Luca's future wife. Clara felt foolish for even caring, but the thought cut deeper than it should have. "Then go ask her," she said. "She's your world, not mine." Luca stepped closer, not touching her, but lowering his voice as if the broken apartment deserved gentleness. "She is not my world." The words hung between them, too intimate for the hallway, too dangerous for a night already full of threats. Then his lead guard, Matteo, appeared at the top of the stairs with a tablet in his hand. His expression was grim. "Boss, the hotel footage is being leaked." Luca took the tablet. Clara saw the screen over his arm and went cold. A video from the gala had been posted online, but it had been edited. It showed Clara near Luca's table, Clara picking up a glass, Clara holding it in her shaking hand. Then the clip cut to guests shouting about poison. The caption underneath read, Curvy Waitress attempts to poison Mafia Boss after public embarrassment. Clara's breath left her body. No, that's not what happened. The comments were already multiplying, cruel and hungry. People called her desperate, jealous, crazy, a nobody trying to trap a powerful man. Every old wound opened at once, not because strangers hated her, but because the lie looked believable to a world already trained to see women like her as suspicious when they stood too close to power. Luca's hand closed around the tablet hard enough to make Matteo flinch. Who posted it? An anonymous account, Matteo said, but Vanessa Cole shared it 2 minutes ago with a crying emoji and a statement saying she feared for your safety. Clara laughed once, broken and bitter. Of course she did. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. Unknown numbers, messages, threats, a photo of her apartment building taken from across the street. Luca took one step toward the window, and his guards immediately pulled the curtains shut. "Pack a bag," he said. Clara stared at him. "No, Clara! No, I know how this works. I get taken to some rich man's house, and by morning everyone says I really was involved. I have my mother here, I have a job, I have a life, even if people like Vanessa think it's small." Luca's eyes softened, but his voice stayed firm. "Your life is not small, it is being targeted. Because of you," she shot back, then regretted it when pain flashed across his face. Before he could respond, a knock sounded at the open door. Slow, polite, terrifying. Matteo drew his weapon but kept it lowered. Luca moved Clara behind him with one arm, not grabbing, only shielding. A uniformed police detective stepped inside with 2 officers behind him, rain shining on their shoulders. "Clara Bennett?" the detective asked. "We need you to come with us for questioning in connection with the attempted poisoning of Luca Marcelli." Clara went white. Luca's voice dropped into a silence that felt more dangerous than shouting. "She is not going anywhere." The detective lifted a clear evidence bag. Inside was Clara's name tag from the hotel, stained with something dark, and a small vial she had never seen before. "Then explain why this was found in her locker." Clara looked at Luca, horrified, but before she could speak, Vanessa's voice came from the stairwell behind the officers, smooth as glass and sweet as poison. "I told everyone she was dangerous. Move 1 step closer to her, Vanessa, and I will forget every polite promise I made tonight," Luca said, and the hallway of Clara Bennett's apartment building turned so silent that even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Vanessa Cole stood behind the officers in her silver gown, dry under a white designer coat, her lips curved with the kind of sympathy cameras loved and wounded women recognized as cruelty. Clara stood barefoot on the worn floorboards, Luca's arm still in front of her like a shield, while the detective held up the evidence bag with her stained name tag and the vial she had never seen. "This is ridiculous," Clara said, her voice trembling but not breaking. "I didn't put that in my locker." Vanessa tilted her head. "Sweetheart, desperate people do desperate things. You were humiliated in front of everyone, then you touched Luca's glass. It's all on video." The word sweetheart landed like a slap, but Clara did not lower her eyes this time. She looked straight at Vanessa and said, "You spilled champagne on me because I wouldn't disappear fast enough for you." Vanessa's smile thinned. Luca noticed. So did Detective Harris. Before anyone could speak, Mrs. Bennett called from the bedroom, weaker but sharper than before. "That woman is lying." Clara turned. "Mom, please stay in bed." But her mother had already pushed herself upright, clutching the doorframe in one hand and a small silver medical alert pendant in the other. Her face was pale, yet her eyes were fixed on Luca with old grief. "Your brother," she said to him. "Marco Marcelli. He wasn't just shot that night. He was poisoned before the ambulance arrived." Luca went completely still. The name Marco changed the temperature in the room. His guards looked at one another. Vanessa's face, for half a second, lost all colour. Luca's voice was barely above a whisper. "How do you know my brother's name?" Mrs. Bennett swallowed hard. "Because I was the night nurse at St. Catherine's 5 years ago. They told me to change the report. They told me a Marcelli enemy had already claimed responsibility, and if I loved my daughter, I would forget what the blood work showed." Clara felt the floor tilt under her. "Mom?" Tears filled her mother's eyes. "I kept a copy. I thought if anything happened to me, Clara might need proof that the same people who killed your brother were still inside your circle." Luca looked like a man seeing a ghost step out of his own past. For 5 years he had believed Marco died because Luca failed to protect him during a street ambush. That guilt had turned him into stone. It had taught him to trust no one, love no one, need no one. Now an exhausted woman in a Queen's apartment was telling him his brother had been dying before the first gunshot was fired. Vanessa laughed too quickly. "This is insane. She's sick. She's confused." Clara's head snapped toward her. "Don't talk about my mother." The words came out low, fierce, and every person in the hallway finally saw what Luca had seen from the beginning. Clara Bennett was not weak because she had been hurt. She was strong because she had stayed kind while carrying pain no one bothered to notice. Detective Harris lowered the evidence bag slightly. "Mrs. Bennett, where is this copy now?" Mrs. Bennett's eyes moved to the wall of family photos scattered across the floor, behind Clara's graduation picture. Clara rushed to the broken frame, hands shaking as she lifted the backing. Taped inside was a small flash drive wrapped in yellowed hospital tape. Luca's expression hardened as if every locked door in his life had just opened at once. Matteo stepped forward. "Boss, let me secure it." Luca's eyes cut to him. "No." One word, but Matteo froze. Clara noticed his hand drifting too close to his jacket. She remembered the apartment door cracked open, the damage, the envelope, the men following her. And suddenly a small detail returned. When they arrived, Matteo had not looked surprised by the broken lock. He had looked annoyed. Clara stepped back with the flash drive pressed to her chest. "You already knew it was here," she whispered. Matteo's face changed, just slightly. "Enough." Luca saw it too. Vanessa's voice sharpened. "Luca, you cannot seriously listen to this waitress over your own people." Luca moved slowly between Matteo and Clara. "My people do not break into a woman's home and plant evidence in her locker." Matteo's hand went inside his jacket, but Detective Harris and 2 Marcelli guards drew on him at the same time. No shots fired, no chaos, just the terrifying click of truth cornering a liar. Matteo raised his hands, smiling with a bitterness that made Clara's skin crawl. "You should have married Vanessa and signed the alliance, Luca. The Moretti family offered peace. All you had to do was ignore the big waitress like everyone else." Luca's face went colder than winter. Clara flinched at the insult, but Luca did not let it hang in the air. "Use her name," he said. Matteo sneered. "Clara found the poison. Clara had the nurse. Clara had the file. She ruined 5 years of work in one night." Vanessa backed toward the stairs, but Detective Harris turned to her. "Miss Cole, don't move." Then Clara's phone rang from the overturned couch. Unknown number. Luca nodded once and she answered on speaker with trembling fingers. A distorted male voice filled the room. "Give us the flash drive by midnight, or Mrs. Bennett's hospital equipment stops working, and tell Marcelli the woman he followed home is the reason his empire burns." The call ended. Clara looked at her mother, then at Luca, horror and guilt flooding her face. "This is my fault." Luca stepped closer, took off his rain-soaked coat and placed it gently around her shoulders in front of everyone. "No," he said, his voice quiet but unbreakable. "This is the first honest thing that has happened in my life in 5 years." Then the lights in the apartment building went out. The darkness lasted only 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds Clara learned what Luca Marcelli became when someone threatened the woman behind him. He did not shout. He did not panic. He pulled her and Mrs. Bennett away from the window with one arm, placed his body between them and the hallway, and said in a voice so calm it terrified everyone, "Nobody moves until I say." Emergency lights flickered red along the stairwell. Mrs. Bennett's oxygen machine gave one weak beep, then switched to backup power. Clara's fear sharpened into something harder. "They weren't bluffing," she whispered. "The hospital network, the equipment company, someone is inside all of it." Luca looked at the flash drive still clutched in her hand. "Then we do this before midnight." Detective Harris wanted to take Clara downtown. Vanessa wanted a lawyer. Matteo wanted a deal. Luca gave them none of those things. He ordered his loyal guards to secure Mrs. Bennett with a private medical team, then turned to Clara, his rain-soaked coat still around her shoulders. "You can stay here with your mother," he said softly. "No," Clara answered, surprising herself. "They used my locker, my name, my mother, and my body like I was something easy to step over. I'm done hiding while powerful people decide what I'm worth." Luca stared at her for one heartbeat too long, and something in his guarded face shifted. Respect, not pity. Then stay close. They returned to the Marcelli Hotel, under a sky split by storm clouds, not through the glittering entrance where cameras waited, but through the underground garage where black cars lined the concrete like sleeping wolves. Upstairs, in the private ballroom, the family council had already gathered for the midnight alliance signing. Men in dark suits, women with diamonds at their throats. Vanessa standing near the stage, pale but still beautiful enough for the room to forgive her before she spoke. Beside her stood Victor Moretti, head of the rival family, smiling like a man who had already counted Luca's empire as his own. "You brought the waitress," Victor said when Luca entered with Clara at his side. The room turned. Clara felt every stare land on her curves, her damp hair, her torn uniform under Luca's coat, and for one awful second the old shame tried to pull her eyes to the floor. Luca felt it. Without looking away from Victor, he reached back and took Clara's hand in front of the entire room. Not hidden, not accidental, chosen. "Her name is Clara Bennett," he said. "Say it correctly or say nothing." Vanessa laughed softly. "Luca, this is embarrassing. She is accused of poisoning you." "By evidence planted by my own guard," Luca replied. Gasps rippled through the room. Matteo, wrists restrained, was dragged forward by two guards and forced to stand beneath the chandelier light. Victor's smile faded just enough for Clara to notice. Luca stepped to the center of the room. 5 years ago, my brother Marco died, and I blamed enemies outside these walls. Tonight, a waitress everyone mocked found the same poison in my glass. Then her home was searched, her name was framed, and her sick mother was threatened because she had proof. Victor lifted his hands. This is theater. Clara's pulse hammered. The flash drive felt hot in her palm. "No," she said, her voice trembling through the microphone Luca's guard handed her. "Theater is smiling for cameras while ruining someone's life behind the scenes." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Clara." For the first time, Clara smiled without fear. "I have been careful my whole life. Careful not to take up too much space. Careful not to be too loud. Careful not to cry when women like you made rooms feel smaller than they were. I'm done being careful with liars." She plugged the flash drive into the ballroom system herself. The wall screen blinked once, then filled with old hospital blood work, security logs, payment transfers, and a recorded call between Matteo and Victor discussing Marco Marcelli's poisoning. The room erupted. Vanessa backed away, but the next file opened before she could run. Hotel footage from earlier that night, raw and unedited, showing her handing an envelope to the fake waiter in the service corridor, then spilling champagne on Clara to create a distraction. Clara heard her own breath break. Luca's hand tightened around hers, steady and warm. Victor's expression turned empty. "You think love makes you strong, Luca?" he said. "Love gives men something to lose." His hand moved toward his jacket. Clara saw it before anyone else did. Maybe because she had spent years watching faces for cruelty before it arrived. Maybe because protecting people had become instinct. She stepped forward, not behind Luca but beside him, and shoved the microphone stand into Victor's arm as Luca pulled her back. A shot cracked into the chandelier, raining crystal over the ballroom like ice. Screams filled the room. Luca wrapped Clara against his chest and turned, shielding her from falling glass. Guards tackled Victor before he could fire again, but across the chaos Vanessa grabbed the microphone with shaking hands, mascara streaking down her face. "She planned this," she screamed. "He is destroying everything for a fat waitress." The insult hit the room, ugly and desperate. Luca released Clara only enough to face the crowd. Blood trickled from a small cut near his temple, but his voice carried over every frightened whisper. "No," he said, looking at Clara as if the whole empire had become background noise. "I am destroying everything that ever made her feel unworthy." Then Matteo, forgotten near the side door, smiled through the chaos and pressed a hidden phone to his ear. Across the screen behind them, a countdown appeared. 5 minutes until Mrs. Bennett's backup power failed. 5 minutes. The countdown glowed across the ballroom screen while Clara Bennett felt the entire room tilt beneath her torn shoes. 5 minutes until her mother's backup power failed. 5 minutes until the people who had mocked her body, framed her name, and threatened her family proved they could still take one more thing from her. Luca Marcelli turned to Matteo with a fury so controlled it looked almost calm, but Clara saw the truth in his eyes. He was not afraid for his empire. He was afraid for her. "Where is the access code?" Luca asked. Matteo smiled through the blood on his lip. "You can't stop it from here." Clara's gaze dropped to the hidden phone in Matteo's hand, then to the hotel control panel beside the stage. Her heart pounded, but her mind cleared. "Yes, we can," she said. Vanessa scoffed, shaking under the chandelier light. "You're a waitress." Clara stepped toward her. Luca closed beside her, but no longer in front of her. "Exactly. I worked this hotel for 3 years. I know every back hallway, every service elevator, every emergency override rich guests never notice." She grabbed the phone from Matteo's hand before his restrained wrists could move and shoved it into the hands of Luca's tech man. Then she ran, not away from danger this time, but straight through it. Luca followed her down the service corridor, past silver trays, torn linen, and stunned staff whispering her name with a respect they had never used before. Clara reached the maintenance room, slapped the wall switch, and pulled open the emergency power cabinet. Red lights blinked like a heartbeat. "The medical line is routed through the Hotel Charity Foundation," she said, remembering years of invoices, deliveries, and late-night calls she was never paid enough to answer. Vanessa hosted the fundraiser. Matteo used the foundation account. Luca looked at her as if he had just watched a locked door open inside his own chest. "Tell me what to do." No man had ever said that to her without mockery. Clara swallowed the ache in her throat and pointed. "Cut the remote relay. Now." Luca tore off the metal cover with both hands while Clara used the key taped beneath the cabinet, the one only service workers knew existed. The countdown hit 30 seconds. 20. 10. Clara's hands shook, but Luca covered them with his, not taking over, only steadying her. Together they turned the manual switch. The screen went black. Somewhere across Queens, Mrs. Bennett's oxygen machine kept breathing for her. Clara sagged against the wall, and Luca caught her before her knees gave out. "She's safe," his tech man confirmed over the phone. Clara covered her face and cried once, silently, the way women cry when they have spent too long being strong. Luca lowered himself in front of her. Right there on the cold service floor, Mafia Boss on his knees, blood at his temple, hands gentle around hers. "Look at me, Clara Bennett," he said. She did. "You saved my life, my brother's name, your mother, and everyone in that room from believing another lie. Never let them make you feel small again." By morning, Vanessa Cole and Matteo were in custody. Victor Moretti's alliance had collapsed and the edited video had been replaced by the truth. Clara standing in a ballroom full of powerful people, refusing to disappear. Luca paid Mrs. Bennett's medical debts quietly, not as a price for Clara's affection, but as protection he should have offered the moment her family became a target. Weeks later, Clara returned to the Marcelli Hotel not as a waitress carrying trays, but as the new director of the Charity Foundation, rebuilding it for working families who had been ignored too long. At the reopening, under warm gold lights, Luca stood beside her instead of above her. When cameras shouted questions about why he had ignored every model in New York but followed a curvy waitress home, he looked at Clara, took her hand in front of everyone, and answered, because she was the only woman in that room who saw danger, chose courage, and still had enough heart left to protect someone else. Clara smiled through tears, no longer ashamed of the space she filled, no longer apologizing for being seen. She had not become worthy because a mafia boss loved her. She had always been worthy. Luca was simply the first dangerous enough to protect her and gentle enough to prove it. And as they walked out together into the soft Manhattan sunrise, the city that once laughed at Clara Bennett finally learned her name. So tell me, if everyone mocked you but one powerful person saw your true heart, would you trust them? Subscribe for more emotional Mafia Boss stories where love protects, truth wins, and the woman everyone underestimated becomes unforgettable.